Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first look of Week 10, and I'm recording this on Monday, so we'll see what happens on Monday Night Football. Week 10 in general, landmines everywhere. I mean, you had Josh Allen dominating Josh Allen on Jacksonville, defensive line, sack fumbles, interceptions, tackles for loss. I mean, all this type of stuff, and the pressure was there. Dak and Josh Allen, two stacks that I like, two of my four favorite stacks, ended up not getting there, right? They ended up not getting there because a lot of third downs and longs and ended in sacks. The pressure was not holding up. Tyron Smith being out for the Cowboys was not great, so we try to move forward. Lamar Jackson was great in Week 9, but we try and move forward. Hopefully Monday night tonight is a solid start at that, but the next step is Week 10's first look. Analyzing, reviewing what happened, watching some tape on Week 9 already, understanding what the routes and the usage were. We have some more bye weeks. We're going to talk about it all in a first look, try and build out these lineups for cash, for a GVP format, and rock and roll from there. Take a look at what's happening on the sponsor, the presenting sponsor today, Dibs, in the marketplace, opportunities to buy and sell, and just kind of whose stock is on the rise and whose stock is on the fall after last week if you're looking at the short-term market. But for right now, let's attack this with a first look, lineup, discuss some things. Subscribe button's right there. 2 seconds at a time. Make sure you subscribe. 40% of people aren't subscribed to the channel. Just check on that. And let's get into it right now, starting with, as we always do, the quarterback position. So this is an 11-game slate. So just a little bit of overarching news as we head into the week to get you ready for this week. It is an 11-game slate this week, and what you are finding is overall 4 games are starting with a 50 or higher total. Tampa Bay and Washington football team, 50.5. Jacksonville and Indy, divisional matchup, that is 51. Atlanta versus Dallas, 51.5, with Matt Ryan coming off of his best game in a while, right? Looked like one of the best quarterbacks last week, right up there with Justin Herbert. And then Seattle versus Green Bay is 51. It looks like Russell Wilson is set to return. Aaron Rodgers is going to start as long as there's no setbacks, and his COVID protocol testing will be ready to go. And if that's the case, you're going to get a nice game environment from that one. There's a couple other games opening up at like 49, 49.5, but those are the 4. And then in terms of injuries, we can start at quarterback. Trevor Lawrence had some ankle issues, but he came right back in. There was a cut on Baker Mayfield's leg. He's fine. He finished the game. He said afterwards it was just a flesh wound, right? Shout out to Holy Grail, Monty Python, I believe. So after that, we can talk about the injury news as we get to all the other positions, but for quarterbacks, that's about it, right? Yeah, Kyler missed last week. We'll see if he plays this week. At $8,000, with him dealing now with this lower body injury, with the shoulder injury that seems to be lingering still, and his lack of mobile upside, yeah, it's a great matchup versus Carolina, who has a banged-up defense now. Mac Jones with the dirty, filthy move on Brian Burns is going to make that defense even more banged up because that did not look good, locking in a heel lock, which even in the UFC, I mean, the UFC, which is a very vicious sport, it is like an unwritten rule that you just don't go for ankle locks. You don't go for ankle locks because when you pop somebody's ankle really easily, it's basically donezo. It's donezo for their career. You don't do that. What does Mac Jones do after he ends up having a turnover? He does that exact thing to Brian Burns. Just absolutely filthy, terrible, terrible. So we slide down, and it's going to be interesting to see now. 11-game slate. We're getting into the middle part of the season. This is usually when value is hard to come by because we know everybody's roles. Sometimes when injuries and players are filling in, obviously there'll be some value, but we'll see what happens here. Josh Allen versus Buffalo, or Josh Allen on Buffalo versus the Jets. I mean, that's going to be like a smash spot, return spot after they get dominated by Jacksonville. A lot of pressure was coming their way for Josh Allen. He was also out of the pocket operating, and it just wasn't working. The magic that he normally does wasn't working this game, plus pressure leading to sacks, lots of third and long, second and long opportunities, and that's what happened. $7,900 I think is still a fair price point, but we'll keep scrolling. You get Tampa Bay. How do you win this year, right? We've said it. How do you win this year? You get Tom Brady and Matthew Stafford stacks. Matthew Stafford turned into a pumpkin on Sunday Night Football, but we didn't have to worry about it on the main slate. Tom Brady now versus a Washington football team that has been looking better, especially up front, but overall secondary still pretty damn terrible. So Brady's interesting at 7,600, but hopefully we can find more value. Justin Herbert pops off last week, now at home against Minnesota. Just a great spot for points. That game environment, I was very, very surprised to see that the Minnesota versus Chargers game did not open at a 50-plus point total. My guess is that by the end of the week, it gets there. It opened at 48.5. And now, as I'm actually talking about this, it's already bet up, opening at 48.5, already betting up to 51.5, 52 at some spots. So that's very interesting. The Dallas game opened at 51, like we said, already bet up to 53.5. So some of these totals are already starting to pop up, which is nice because we haven't had these high totals in a while. Let's see if Seattle and Green Bay has moved up at all. That one opened at 51. It's actually dropped because probably the uneasy news about both quarterbacks to about 50. So yeah, so that Atlanta Dallas game, and then this game right here with Minnesota and the Chargers is going to look very good. So if you're talking game environments for stacking situations, yeah, great spot right now for Justin Herbert at 7,300 coming off of a massive day. Rodgers at $7,100. Dak Prescott coming off of what is going to be a bad game. Nobody got hurt. I mean, they didn't have Tyron Smith, but the offensive line is getting healthier. Lyle Collins is due back soon, and Dak Prescott at home now and in a bounce back spot where he's still going to have a really nice matchup, really nice team total. Favorites in this one, should be a good game environment. That's nice. Maybe not for cash, but GPP, sure. Russell Wilson might return this week. Jalen Hurts continues to have a solid season, but now back-to-back starts with under 20 fantasy points, under 18 fantasy points. He had 11 and then 16. This is another guy who now goes on the road to Denver. Denver, not a great secondary, but another guy who's just struggling to keep things alive. But the rushing mobility upside is still there, 6,500. I mean, so far what we're seeing, Tannehill versus New Orleans, not really interested. Kirk Cousins on the opposite side versus the Chargers. That's an interesting, if you're talking about large field GPPs. Cash game's not as much. Matt Ryan, so a lot of people might say, yo, Matt, he's averaging 20 fantasy points per game now this year in fantasy. For DraftKings, why don't you like the guy? You don't get this misrepresented. I didn't like the week when Matt Ryan was 8% owned and he had a 3% chance to win GPPs. I was trying to let my viewers know you don't want to play that guy. And when he do that week, he had an okay week, right? He went out there against Miami and he had 22 fantasy points. Now, right here, as you see, is 22 fantasy points ever going to win you a GPP at $5,700? Unlikely when guys that week were scoring 40, when Tom Brady scored 40, when Matthew Stafford scored 40, right? Unlikely that you're going to win that week. So you're going to have this 1 or 2 times a year performance. And you got it right there, 31.5 fantasy points. And now his price point is up to $6,000. And luckily for you last week, Matt Ryan was 3 or 4% owned. So you should try to play Matt Ryan and guess the weeks that he's going to pop off, because that's what you're doing. You're guessing the week that he has this 136 passer rating when he just goes off and has an 11.4 yards per attempt week, as you can see right here. You're trying to guess that week. It's better to try and guess the week when he's low owned than when he's high owned. So that's about it, right? Now this week at $6,000, another good game environment. It'll come down to the ownership. If Matt Ryan's going to come in with an 8 to 10% ownership, I'm going to tell you, this isn't the week to try and get to Matt Ryan when he's throwing to Tajay Sharp and Russell Gage. If he comes in with 2 or 3% and you want to play some shares, mainly in large field GPPs, maybe 3 max, go for it, right? So Matt Ryan this week at $6,000 is going to be ownership dependent, right? No mobile upside, but you saw the week come out last week right there, and that was with no Calvin Ridley, so it was good to see. You get Carson Wentz playing well at home against Jacksonville, and that game with a nice environment. And now it starts to drop off massively. I mean, we're not seeing much value here. I mean, Taylor Heineke, I'm not going back there even against Tampa Bay. I mean, I guess that's like the only thing down here at 5,400, but can you trust that in cash? No. He had 20-plus points against the Packers in a game where they got stalled in the red zone nonstop. Could have been a lot more. So not for cash. GPPs, I think there's just better options. That's like the only thing that stands out down here. You have the banged-up Trevor Lawrence. You have Baker Mayfield, Mac Jones. I mean, Geno, if there was no Russ, but still not interested. Maybe Taysom Hill starts this week. He came in and looked a lot better than Trevor Siemian on the throws that he actually came in for. That could be appealing at $5,200 against Tennessee. But then Sam Darnold, no. Jordan Love, no, right? Even if he was to start over Rodgers, if Rodgers wasn't back. So this falls off really quickly. Like down here, it's Taysom Hill if he was to draw the start this week. Below $6,000, and it's like Taylor Heineke, and that's about it. Like Carson Wentz, sure, but I'm going to shy away from that one. Prefer JT a little bit more. Matt Ryan, this range is appealing with Cousins and Matt Ryan if you're talking large field GPP stacks, but still a low percentage of that actually hitting for you. So you come up here and it's Jalen Hurts. Do you trust him to get right back on the 20-plus point fantasy weeks, or you just say this is the week that we have to pay up at quarterback for cash games, which really isn't the way that you want to go about it because you're trying to find value in other situations. So let's go in here and let's put Tom Brady in, who just seamlessly never lets us down, but let's see if we're actually going to have enough money to do some other things, right? And as we slide into the running back position, let me be the first one to let you know, if you don't already know from last week, about Dibs, Dibs.io, the sponsor of today's show. What is Dibs? It is a marketplace where you can buy and sell fractions of players, their cards. And this is a very interesting concept and something that we talked about last week. And so you go here right to the website, you go to Dibs. It is basically what it is right now. It's real-time fractional card market. And the interesting thing about Dibs is a few things. We talked about some of the packs, the cards, the players that we got last week on the stream. The DK Metcalfs of the world. That's a player that is already ascending to be a top 5 wide receiver in the league. We love that. The Chris Godwins, and after we got the pack, he's had back-to-back weeks without Antonio Brown of 100-plus yards and a touchdown, right? You see week in and week out, these players' stocks are going to rise. Now, obviously, you want to think about those players week in and week out because you don't want to have bad players, but you also want to look at what their potential is for the long term and try and hold players who have the upside to be legends or maybe just Hall of Famers or all-stars. There's something to hold that value from the long term. So when you're buying and selling these cards in the marketplace on Dibs.io, think about that. And it's a lot of fun, right? Like think about what happened this past week. Like Michael Pittman continues to dominate as a second-year player, second-round pick. That's exciting. Lamar Jackson continues to dominate this season from all facets, 100-plus rushing yards. The legend of Lamar Jackson, the potential for him to be a Hall of Famer down the road and another all-star and all-pro is there. That card and that player is somebody, maybe even if it's a buy high, you want to go there. How Sam Darnold is basically now falling to nothing. A backup QB is going to happen very soon for Sam Darnold for the rest of his career. At best, a former early pick, and obviously now that card's not worth much, but it's just interesting to see this. If you're a fantasy football player, you have a lot of intel. You know how these players are going to trend. If you are a dynasty fantasy football player especially, you're already thinking in the mindset of how are these players based on their age, based on their contracts, how are they going to be not just this year, but a year or 2 years from now, maybe even you look out 3 years. So you have a lot of advantage for a lot of people watching this right now in the Dibs marketplace. And if you would like to check out Dibs right now, this is what you do. You sign up for Dibs today. They have a special offer this week because they're trying to test some stuff out. Use the code SAL. There's a link down below. Use the code SAL, S-A-L. You will get a free Frac pack to open. It's called your intro pack. And then they'll send you a code in your email for another free pack. And the packs are going to be valued potentially worth up to $50, right? Up to $50 on that Frac pack. And then after that, your cards can be worth whatever depending on the performance and how savvy you are in terms of trading in that marketplace, buying and selling in the marketplace. So there you go. The real-time fractional card market is Dibs. Check it out. The code SAL for not only a free intro pack, so you get 2 packs, a free intro pack valued up to potentially $50, and then also you get another free pack that they'll send you. I think it's very interesting. I think it's a different way to kind of have, one, you can try to make some money in there, but 2, just have another things in action, in play with buying and selling and having some exposure in other markets. I think it's interesting. So check Dibs out. Thank you, Dibs, and the beautiful people over at Dibs watching this right now for sponsoring the L program today. So the running back position now. So Christian McCaffrey last week, I mean, he had his normal role, right? I mean, maybe not fully normal, but he had this nice role. He ended up seeing 18 touches in this game for a guy who was supposed to only see a 40% role. That is now the 3rd time that McCaffrey's been hurt and come back and through multiple head coaches, and he's just played his full-time role. When the going gets tough, he actually plays. He fumbled, but he didn't lose it. So McCaffrey at $8,400. I mean, this is a guy who's always in the 9K range. It's hard to not want to just hammer in McCaffrey here to start this off blindly, over Kamara, who's getting a nice role, over J2, who continues to smash. These running backs this week are expensive, but they continue to smash. At home against Jacksonville for JT, a solid matchup. A man who continues to go out there and just lay 20-plus point days, right? You're looking at 37, 20, 22, 32, 35, 23. I mean, this guy has gone for 20-plus fantasy points and paid off the price that he's currently at in 6 straight weeks. So how do I not have interest in that in such a great matchup again for a guy that they're feeding the rock? The run blocking unit is really coming together now as they start to get a little bit healthier. So that is nice. Dalvin Cook is here. All the elite running backs are on the slate this week. The last couple of weeks we haven't had the elite running backs or as many of them. All of them are on the slate. Najee Harris plays tonight. He gets the dream matchup against the dead last ranked defense and run defense in the Detroit Lions. Najee Harris leads the NFL in opportunity share, seeing 25.3 opportunities per game before this Monday night game. He's at home. I mean, you know what they want to do there. He's seeing 7 targets per game. That's great. Eckler's on the slate. Nick Chubb's on the slate. Ezekiel Elliott, Aaron Jones, Swift, all these guys are on the slate this week. This is crazy. So do we have to pay up for McCaffrey? It's hard to not want to get to him at $8,400. We're already paying for an expensive quarterback. It's starting to quickly seem like we might not have money elsewhere, but it's $7,900. I mean, I just want the secure touches. The secure touches are with Najee Harris. When McCaffrey's out there, they're with him, but now we only have $4,300 to spend per player. That's not seeming great. Let's see what else we have at running back here outside of all these. I mean, obviously, I like Jonathan Taylor, but the value here in terms of leverage plays for GPPs, it's going to look great because we're going to have a lot of lower owned. I sense we get a somewhat lower owned, maybe both of these running backs in Dalvin Cook and Eckler if people stack up that game with a nice total and start to lean towards a cheaper Chubb or a cheaper Ezekiel Elliott, Aaron Jones, if Rodgers back, a little bit more money for Jonathan Taylor in CMC. I could really see this Dalvin Cook, Austin Eckler range going 5% home with some value. I mean, Aaron Jones at home. You're getting a lot more A.J. Dillon lately, but if you get Aaron Rodgers back, more red zone opportunities for the man who came into last week being number 2 in red zone opportunities. That whole offense for Dallas, now a really good game environment as favorites at home in a good matchup. Zeke was still seeing the touches last week, but you're not going to see 20 touches and a lot of carries on the ground when your team is trailing big in the game, right? So Zeke saw his touches drop, but he was still seeing the overall percentage of touches compared to Tony Pollard. Price point doesn't change. Game environment just as good. Zeke's another guy that you can get a discount, maybe a $1,400 off McCaffrey. We can save some money and go there for another guy who's going to be in line for a massive usage. Cordell Patterson continues to play well. James Conner, he's up here now after scoring 3 touchdowns, and in the first quarter, Chase Edmonds got hurt. So maybe full-time role, somewhat Edom Benjamin, right? The former 7th-round pick, a little bit of Edom Benjamin in there. But if he's at home, another good game environment. Conner's got touchdown upside. Robinson missed the last week. James Robinson on here. Doesn't even matter if he's an underdog because he runs the routes. $6,200 fair price. Fournette fair price. We'll have to track the status, and this is a good point now to point out that Chase Edmonds, we mentioned he got hurt last week. The running backs, a lot of running backs dealt with injury. Devontae Booker not going to be on this slate. He got hurt with a ribbon or a hip injury. Zach Moss, a concussion, so we'll have to track that for this week. You have Damian Harris had a head injury. His backfield running mate Stevenson had a hand injury. injury. So we'll have to see what happens in this New England backfield, as maybe it's Brandon Bolden in the J.J. Taylor backfield. We'll see as the week goes on. Michael Carter at home. Obviously, you would like Mike White to be in for that one, as he was banged up. He said his whole hand went numb with a forearm injury. Seems a little bit freaky. McNichols didn't get the role. I mean, it was a three-headed backfield with Adrian Peterson and Deontay Foreman, so not good for McNichols at that price tag. This is just your like 50-50 running back range of guys who you're happy if they score 10 points, which we don't want to pay $5K for 10 points. So now we're quickly down in this range. I'll just mention if Edmonds is healthy, his price point keeps dropping. $5,100 is fine there. We're quickly out of a range that doesn't look good. I'm not playing Adrian Peterson, especially in a matchup against New Orleans, which is terrible, in a three-headed backfield where, yeah, he saw the most carries at 10, but Foreman was heavily involved. McNichols was involved in the passing game. 10 carries for 21 yards. Sure, he found the end zone, but not appealing at all. These Eagles running backs don't really seem that appealing to me either. None of them. Kenny Gateman got in the end zone, but he only had a couple of carries. We're quickly to a range where there's no options down here. I mean, Devin Singletary at $4,700. If the concussion keeps as a big favorite with a nice team total still for Buffalo in this one, if the concussion keeps Zach Moss out, $4,700 Devin Singletary is going to be the guy to go to, especially because he has this receiving game role. You saw it last week. Look at this. 7 catches on 8 targets for 43 yards. That receiving game role for him is something that they continue to give to Singletary, even over Zach Moss over the last couple of weeks. So we have to track the status of Zach Moss, but Singletary can be the cheat code that we need this week at $4,700 because I'm not seeing anything else down here. I mean, maybe the New England running backs, if they're both out, you can get away with a Brandon Bolden who had, like, I believe, like 90 total yards this past week. Brandon Bolden right here, 4,400. Obviously prefers Singletary in my opinion. You know, Benjamin maybe takes on a little bit of the, I think it's still going to be just James Conner full workload, but maybe sees 8 to 10 touches. He saw 9 carries this past week, found the end zone with no Chase Edmonds. So Devin Singletary is very interesting here. Going to be a massive favorite and a really good matchup versus a bottom 5, probably bottom 2 with the Detroit Lions run defense and the Giants. We'll see if we can get Zach Moss to not clear the concussion protocol. The running back is pretty top heavy. It's basically really top heavy, and then Devin Singletary. Lots of solid options though, because so many good ones are on the slate that you are getting an affordable James Robinson and an affordable Fournette. I don't think we're going to be able to afford this many expensive players. So Najee Harris is on here. I think that maybe we try and let's just taking out McCaffrey in the cash line just seems terrible. Let's leave McCaffrey and Najee Harris for now. I don't normally go 3 running backs, but if you want to try to play cash, let's just put Devin Singletary in for now to get $4,700, and we can get to $4,200 per lineup. We can just go into the defense and special teams, pick a dirt cheap one. Jets versus Buffalo, not great. Washington football team versus Tampa Bay, not great. Jaguars versus Indy, yeah, Carson Wentz has made a lot of bad mistakes here and there, so we'll go there with that defense. We'll get up to $4,800 per spend. To the tight end position we go now, and let's look at tight ends here. So yet another week of no on the main slate, Kelsey or Darren Waller, which leaves Pitts for the second time this year to be the most expensive guy. Had a fine week last week, ran the routes, 6 targets. I think he brought in 3 catches. That's fine. Detroit versus Pittsburgh, Hawkinson's up there. Not really interested off the front. Dalton Schultz had another solid week of 10 fantasy points. He's $5K, definitely involved in stacks and GPPs. Not so much where I'm looking at right now. Goddard, 6 more targets last week. Overpriced in my opinion, Zach Ertz, but if guys are going to be out like a Hopkins and an AJ Green again this week, we'll see. Looks appealing. Maybe Dawson Knox returns. Rob Gronkowski, maybe he returns, although I don't think it's going to look that way right now. Noah Fant, track his status with the on COVID list with backup tight end Alberto getting hurt last week as well. Only other injuries were that Jonnu Smith left and Durham Smythe for Miami left with an eye injury. Jonnu Smith was a shoulder. These tight ends kind of fall off the face of the earth here. Like, we'll track Logan Thomas. If Logan Thomas is in, I like him at 4K flat versus Tampa Bay, definitely, especially in run back stacks. He'll probably be the best option in run backs. I don't trust Terry McLaurin's price tag with Taylor Heineke too much. And if Logan Thomas is not in, we'll run right back out to Ricky Seals-Jones at $3,700 running so many routes. So that seems like a really easy way to play tight end this week, especially in Tampa Bay stacks. Whichever Washington football team player starts, I would really like it to be Ricky Seals-Jones because that means he wouldn't have competition. Where if Logan Thomas is in, maybe Ricky Seals-Jones still steals some of that. Dan Arnold, another day of 10+ fantasy points, right? 7 more targets for Dan Arnold in that game. And now he gets a nice matchup against Indy, who just lets running backs and also tight ends catch the ball in front of them for like 3 to 4 years now. So Dan Arnold, you get Tyler Conklin with a 7-target game in a good game environment. This looks like the range for tight ends. Whichever one of these Washington football team tight ends at 4K, or ideally Ricky Seals-Jones at $3,700. And then right here, Dan Arnold $3,500. Did his price point come down $100 from last week, or is it up $100? So his price point only goes up $100, even though he secures his role for 3 10+ point fantasy days and out of his last 4 weeks and just targets after targets. Tyler Conklin's here. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of this range. Jared Cook can continue to be in GPP stacks. Adam Trotman last week, I believe, saw 7 targets. Obviously, a lot of that with Trevor Siemian, who might not play this week. Not much upside on those targets, but at least he was running the routes. A lot of guys, Deontay Harris had a little bit of success as well in that game. Other than Adam Trotman, I don't even think that's a $3,000 Adam Trotman, so I'd rather go to the other guys who have shown more secure roles and just better offenses. Tommy Sweeney, 2 catches, 10 yards, not going to get done, and we might actually get Dawson Knox back this week, but it's not looking good elsewhere. Ryan Griffin saw some targets from Josh Johnson, but they were playing catch-up mode the whole time. Not a lot of upside or stability to those targets. I don't think there's anybody at 2,500. So out of these $3,500 tight ends, I mean, Conklin looks fine at 3,400, but Dan Arnold continues week in and week out to not have any real competition for his targets. Like, he's getting 7 targets. He's arguably the #1 target in this offense for Trevor Lawrence. So if we do that, that leaves us with 3 wide receivers at 5,200 apiece, which doesn't feel great. I think we're going to have to come down at either quarterback or running back, but let's just see what wide receivers looking like. So you get Devontae Adams up top, and I'll say this, at home, Devontae Adams, if Rodgers returns, is only 7,900. That is a steal. That is a steal. This guy was $9,000, not last main slate, but 2 main slates ago when Aaron Rodgers was out there. And at that price and at that tag, yeah, it was expensive, but it was like, okay, that's fine. Now he's $7,900. That is a steal. Coming off of a 14-target game with Jordan Love that didn't result into much, just terrible throws his way. So Adams looks good. Jefferson scored last week, another great game environment, in my opinion. Honestly, like a top 3 receiver in the league, Justin Jefferson, in terms of overall stuff, what he does, he is going to be strongly in play. McLaurin in play in stacks, although expensive. Diggs continues to just be getting all the underlying stats, producing somewhat, but none of these massive games yet. Another good matchup versus the Jets, though. They have another injury in their secondary. We'll see what happens there. Godwin is $7,100, and Godwin will depend on Antonio Brown. They said before the bye week that he was expected to return after the bye week, so he's expected to return this week, but apparently he was still in a walking boot as of this weekend, so we'll see what happens to Antonio Brown. We'll see where his price point is. If Antonio Brown's out, Godwin's a fair price point because he continues to dominate. He goes on the outside, he gets the nicer matchups, and he just plays a lot better, right? When there's no Antonio Brown out there stealing the deep targets, to give Godwin a different role. We'll see where Antonio Brown is when we get there. Lamb and Amari both had goose egg performances. Maybe people jump off of them in a nice game environment. Not standing out for cash. Keenan Allen, though, standing out in a major way. I mean, Keenan Allen got right back to the old form of Keenan Allen, right? He had these games where he wasn't producing a ton, like just producing somewhat maybe, right? In week 8, he had that nice game. He started off hot, then didn't do much, but he's just so steady. 25 fantasy points, goes over 100 yards, gets his 13 targets. Now it's this great game environment. I mean, Keenan Allen stands out as, if you can find the value, and there's a lot of really strong running back plays, you just secure those 10 targets in a good matchup versus Minnesota. You kind of want to put that in your lineup, but the second we put Keenan Allen in, we're down to $4,300 per player. We're going to need a real cheap wide receiver to make this work out. Next up, you get Deontay Johnson, Najee Harris's teammate, another secure player. He plays on Monday Night Football tonight. 13 targets in 3 out of his last 4 games heading into tonight. He is 4th in the NFL with a 30% target share, very quietly. And a matchup against Detroit, and they're terrible cornerbacks, just god-awful cornerbacks. Deontay Johnson at $6,800 I want to play, but now we only have $1,900 left, and that's not going to work. Let's just keep scrolling down. We'll try and go cheaper at either quarterback or running back there, but Deontay Johnson, that's secure. DK Metcalf, if Russell Wilson returns, we like that a whole lot against this Green Bay secondary that is banged up, and Eric Stokes got hurt last week, and Kenny Clark for interior pressure on Russell Wilson if he plays. That's going to be a very nice game environment for Seattle and Green Bay if both quarterbacks are able to play. We keep scrolling. Mike Williams, great GPP plays. The price comes down. He's not producing. Maybe even the ownership stays low. Same thing for Lockett if Russell Wilson is able to return. You get Michael Pittman, priced all the way up now to $6,300. He comes up like $1,000 since his last main slate. And why is that? Well, because Michael Pittman just continues to go out there and dominate. We touched on him on talking about dibs in terms of this is a guy that you probably want to buy and sell, or buy, not sell, but get in the marketplace and get some of these fractional shares of Michael Pittman because the guy just continues to produce. Michael Pittman now, so far this season, is averaging over his last 5 games 19.64 fantasy points per game. You can see my stat right here, and that includes a week 6 sample where he only had 2 catches for 35 yards, right? So in 4 of his last 5 games, if you look at those samples, he's just jumping over 20-plus points a week. Very much so in line right now with what's happening with Carson Wentz. They are clicking together. I think $6,300 is just kind of a fair price point. Like, I still think you can play him, but it's not the $5,300 smash play at this point, but a fine matchup for him. We keep going down. DJ Moore, I mean, as long as his quarterbacks are as bad as they are, it's tough to trust him. Price point goes down $100. Amari's down here. Or actually, Amari's price point comes up $500, but a nice matchup. There's Antonio Brown at $6,100. Antonio Brown is the guy that I want to play, right? Antonio Brown is the play this week if he's indeed healthy, but we'll have to track that. Right now, Antonio Brown in 3 out of his 5 games this year has 24-plus Draftkings points and 8.4 targets per game. He is the wide receiver 1 on this team when he's out there, and a great matchup. We'll track what that news looks like. Keep scrolling down. Emmanuel Sanders led all wide receivers heading into Monday Night Football in routes run last week. Saw 7 targets after the goose egg last week. Definitely in play in stacks. Sutton struggling. Jerry Jeudy's price point comes up only $300. So Jerry Jeudy is a solid play here. Jerry Jeudy has so far this season, and I put a tweet out earlier today, so this is perfect timing. Jerry Jeudy, you can see it here, has ran 72 routes in 3 games this year, leaving one of those games early. So 72 routes. He's seen 19 targets. That is a 26% target rate, which is very good. On his routes run, being targeted 26% of the time. Coming off of an 8-target game where he scored almost 13 fantasy points, now matching matchup against Philly at 5,300. This is definitely a cash play. Cole Beasley is on here as well. That's a nice price point of $5,200 and makes the Buffalo Stacks, if you want to go right back to them, look appealing and affordable, because after running just 11 routes, I have a tweet in week 5 versus KC. Cole Beasley has averaged 31 routes, 11 targets per game over those last 3 games, and over 19 fantasy points per game. So Cole Beasley, Jerry Jeudy, this looks like a range. Even Jarvis Landry coming off of a stinker. This looks like a range where you might be able to find some value as we approach the 4K range. We have to get rid of somebody here, but Cole Beasley and or Landry seems to be a spot where we can try and save some money. So if we go over here, let's take Devin Singletary out of the flex for now, and let's go up, and you have Najee Harris and Deontay Johnson in an offense that is slower pace, not the highest of scoring, although a really good matchup. Do I want to have both of them in cash? Not really. And since there's so many great running back options, alternatives, let's get rid of Najee Harris here. And if we're going to go down, let's see where we can go down. So I mean, we can go down to Zeke and save a quick $900, and I think that makes sense. You can also go down to James Robinson, another man who's a workhorse running back if he returns this week. So you can save an extra $800 off of Zeke. So if we do that, we get $4,100 per player now. That's still not great for what we're trying to do here. If that's the case, let's try and even go down. Going down off of Brady doesn't feel great, and really like the only options we had were pocket passers. Hurst is like the every week cash guy when you first look at him. If you put Hurts into this lineup, we now have $4,700 per player. That's a little bit more manageable here. If we were to go in here and say, let's put Jerry Jeudy in this type of a lineup at $5,300 with the high target rate, $4,100 now for our remaining player, you kind of need this like Devin Singletary guy to come through for us for the value at running back, because man, coming down off of Keenan Allen, we're trying to build a superstar lineup here. I guess you can come down off of McCaffrey at $8,400 and just then get a Najee Harris or then get a Zeke into your lineup, or really whichever one of these guys is going to be cheaper. Like Zeke is $1,400 cheaper than McCaffrey. Najee Harris, obviously the awesome work that you're going to get there. If you come down now, you have $5,500, and that makes it a little bit easier to secure something in the flex at $5,500. This is a tough week, it looks like. Antonio Gibson, McNichols, none of these look good. I mean, Cole Beasley's like the only one that looks good, but do we really trust that with the way that offense is going? So, man, I mean, do we have like cheap, very cheap wide receivers this week? I mean, let's see. Do we have any very cheap wide receivers that can make this a little bit more manageable? You come down to Elijah Moore, who ran more routes than Keelan Cole last week, but is it going to be Josh Johnson throwing the ball versus Buffalo? You don't really like that. You keep going down. Nothing standing out here. Jamal Agnew, a couple of catches. Rondale Moore, if you saw Christian Kirk, or not Christian Kirk, you saw Hopkins, who was doubtful, missed last week, and AJ Green out. If he was to miss, and you got a return after seeing 5 targets for Rondale Moore, a return of Kyler Murray, that could be appealing. But, man, we're going down here. Deontay Harris had a couple of catches. Don't really want to play him. Into these lower ranges now, we're starting to find the spot where there's not much down here. I mean, unless there's something at like 3K flat that I'm missing, KJ Osborne, So maybe you can fit something with Rondale Moore, or you can just go in here and say that you want to play Devin Singletary, and you take out your running backs, and this is if obviously Zach Moss is out. Otherwise, go to Rondale Moore. He's that cheaper 4K option at receiver. So you go to Devin Singletary here. We have this same lineup. We can take out Cole Beasley. You get Keenan Allen, Deontay Johnson, Jerry Jeudy, and what do we have? We have 7K per player remaining. That's a pretty good amount of money now. If we were to throw Christian McCaffrey in there, we have $5,600 left, and at that spot, we're close to being able to afford a like Antonio Brown or Michael Pittman. $5,600, though, I think it's going to leave us in an awkward spot of Sutton. Yeah, so if we get off of McCaffrey here, maybe we just end up going with these 2 players from Pittsburgh. If you were to go to a Najee Harris at this point against Detroit, you're going to see a lot of usage there. You now get to $6,100, and that $6,100 I think gets you to a better range from what we were seeing at wide receiver. Yeah, you get Antonio Brown there. You have a lot of ifs here, though, is the issue in this type of a build. Like, is Devin Singletary going to have no Zach Moss? Is Antonio Brown going to be active? If so, I like this lineup, right? We get Antonio Brown, wide receiver 1, good usage. Deontay Johnson, Keenan Allen, good usage. Jerry Jeudy is our quote-unquote cheap play. Najee Harris we like, and Devin Singletary would be the cheap play as well. If you're not going to have Devin Singletary out there, it then becomes a pretty quick pivot now to you get Rondale Moore as your other receiver, and that leaves you at $6,400 to play at running back, which is where I would probably go right back to James Robinson, assuming he is active, was close last week. James Robinson plus Najee Harris. I mean, this is a solid build either way, right? It's just going to depend early in the week as we have a lot of injury news we're sorting through. And if you wanted to go GPP build, that's where I would go with like a Tom Brady stack, right? Like a Buck stack this week. Just get the guaranteed stuff. You get your Mike Evans in there. You get your Antonio Brown in there. Run it back with one of those Washington football team tight ends, whichever one is active. If Logan Thomas is active off IR, him. Otherwise, Rookie Seals Jones. That's where you would go at cheap tight end, and then just fill in the other wide receivers to make it work. But I would go with that Tampa Bay game stack versus Washington. Nice team total, nice game environment in general for Tampa Bay. So that's where we're at. This is by far the toughest week that I've seen to try and build a first look lineup, mainly because there's like some murky news out there. But if you're talking about value wide receivers, not many out there. Like all those value wide receivers we've been playing for the most part have been bumped up to the 5 and the 6K range. Pittman no longer 5,300, right? No longer 5K flat, 6K range now. Running backs, there's so many of them. There's so many really good running backs. All the studs are on the slate this week. The problem with the running backs, though, is they're all mostly 7K or plus. That's why you get somewhat value on Fournette, Robinson in that lower 6K. We have to hope Devin Singletary or somebody else opens up. Otherwise, there's not much value. Maybe one of those Patriots running backs opens up. And the other bigger thing to point out, still value at tight end, but quarterback. Quarterback this week, right? If we went through it, quarterback was so top heavy. Quarterback is extremely top heavy this week. Even the guys who have been value plays have been priced up a little bit. Look at quarterback, all above $6,500. And now guys like Jalen Hurts are a little bit murky. The status of Russell Wilson and Rodgers is murky still. You go down here and Ryan Tannehill priced up to the 6K range versus New Orleans. Bad. You get these guys who are appealing in large field GPPs, but if you're trying to play a lot of money in single entries, it's a risk to play a Matt Ryan or a Kirk Cousins there, who are very hot or cold, whose ceilings of 30-plus points come out 1 to 3 times a year. This maybe is the game to do it. But after that, it is just really bad. I mean, the 5K range and really below the 6K range of Matt Ryan, who's priced up this week, it's Taylor Heineke. Hold your nose there. Hasn't really shown much the last month. And that's about it. Taysom Hill if he was to start, although in GPPs, that stacking options aren't great. So the big thing this week's that is different is value wide receivers are a little bit gone, and paying down to quarterback and having more options there in that 6K range is gone as well, because priced up Justin Herbert, priced up to an extent Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson, right? So tougher week to get that. So it'll be interesting as the news comes out this week. Maybe value plays open up as the week goes on. That's normally obviously how that works. But yeah, stay tuned here for the rest of the week. The value plays will come out. Well, it'll be interesting to see the values this week, especially because that's going to be very important. Dropping that on Wednesday. Thursday, top stacks. Obviously very important for you GPP players, many of you out there. Friday, final thoughts. Saturday, that one dude. Sunday, live streams and live streams throughout the week for Showdown Slate. So thank you for tuning in. Before you go, subscribe button right there. Be sure to support the sponsor of the program, Dibs. If you use that code SAL, you will get a free intro pack, right? SAL, S-A-L, simple. And then they'll send you another pack in your email if you were to sign up from this video. Sign up today over there right now. Limited time offer on Dibs.io, the sponsor of the program. Buy and sell in that marketplace. Go get it. Fractional shares of cards. Thank you for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen, fellas, and I will see you. I'll see you when I see you. We'll see you in the next one.